So welcome to this webinar about how to integrate Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics ERP. After this webinar, there will be a number of different sources where you can get additional information. We have white papers and solution overviews, case stories and fact sheets on our homepage, www.rapidionline.com/resources, or you can look at our documentation on the technical side on wiki on myrapidi.com. So this is where you can find additional information about what we are talking about today. So let me start by explaining a little bit what RapidiOnlinie is. Rapidi is a company that is specialized in doing integrations between Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics. It's an open cloud data integration platform, so you don't have to install anything on your own computers. It's a very robust way of doing data integration. It does not require any kind of programming, neither on Rapidi, on Salesforce, or on Microsoft Dynamics. And the integration is direct, meaning that we have no staging of your transfer data at any point in time throughout the integration. So from a data protection perspective, it is completely safe. If you are in a situation where you have multiple endpoints, databases, or companies, it's supported out of the box with a RapidiOnlinie solution. The typical scenario is that you have multiple Microsoft Dynamics databases or companies that you want to integrate into one Salesforce org, but I will come back to that a little later. At Rapidi, we are solution experts with Salesforce and Microsoft expertise. That is required in order to not only provide endpoint support, but also to provide advice on how you build specific integrations to meet your specific business needs. This knowledge has also been used to build out-of-the-box flexible integrations that will help you get onboarded with the integration faster and more robust and in a more simple way compared to if you had to build everything from scratch. There are many good reasons for why you should integrate your systems. Collaboration is always a big topic. When you bring in data from the other system, for instance, from the ERP to Salesforce, you can have a much better overview of the customer's history with your company, past purchase, financial status, payments, etc. And having the right information in place also enables your internal teams to collaborate at a much more efficient level. And efficiency is also a big driver. With the RapidiOnlinie solution, you can eliminate the need to do manual double data entries in the systems, or you can avoid having to switch between systems. For instance, if you want to get an order status and you normally work in Salesforce, you don't have to go to the ERP system to find that. That is information that we can also bring over. Having the systems tightly integrated also can eliminate a lot of rework in bringing the data into the right place. So for instance, we can maintain items, products, pricing information, customer information, etc. So whenever you do something in one of the two systems, that you're working with the right data, so you don't have to redo that later. And the process automation is quite awesome. For instance, when you are in the quote to cash scenario, where you build a quote in Salesforce and you want to convert that to a sales order to your ERP system, that process can be completely automated. One of the benefits of or spin-offs from the integration is also that you get perfectly synchronized data, so you have data that you can trust. You will also experience the possibility to build reports to a higher degree in Salesforce, where you can combine, for instance, both the CRM and the ERP data in one and the same reporting tool. And having the information available also eases the user adoption if you are new to the Salesforce platform. And then there's always a growth element where you want to be able to have better decision support, not only in the sales process, but also overall for the company. And it also helps you increase the customer satisfaction simply because you're able to give more precise answers more quickly. So a lot of good drivers. You have your own, obviously, but just out of the box, there are many good reasons for why you should integrate Salesforce with Microsoft Dynamics ERP. The way that you log on to the system, I'm just going to show it here. You can press login or you can key it in directly. You have to key in your username and your password. We have a two-factor authentication. So for instance, you can have Google Authenticator installed on your phone where you get the number or the token that you have to key in. And then you press login, and then you are viewing your service where you can do the configuration. What you see here are my demo services at the moment. RapidiOnlinie is undergoing the App Exchange security review from time to time. It secures that we are always living up to the standards from Salesforce when it comes to security. So our platform is just as secure as the Salesforce platform itself. With the RapidiOnlinie solution, you can integrate any data between the two systems that you want. It can be standard data, it can be custom data, or it can be data that comes from apps or extensions that you install in either of the two systems. And it's equally easy to integrate any of these data. We can also integrate in any direction. So it can be one way, it can be bidirectional, so between both systems. And you can also decide between the different platforms how you set it up. If you have a one-to-one integration between one ERP instance and one Salesforce, you can also have multiple ERP systems integrating into one Salesforce, or you can even have a many-to-many integration where you have a whole framework of application that gets synchronized based on the rules that you set up. It's pretty awesome. We also support any version of Microsoft Dynamics in Salesforce. Salesforce is pretty easy because everybody runs the same version. But on the Dynamics side, there are many different versions. For instance, on the nav side, we're supporting versions all the way back to 1989. And we're also committed to support the future versions of Microsoft Dynamics. It means that regardless of which upgrade path that you are on, regardless which versions you're running today, you can integrate with one and the same platform now and in the future. So another cool stuff about the RapidiOnlinie, that you can work with a platform that you're already familiar with. This is a typical example of the integration scenarios that we meet, and it applies to more than 90% of all the clients that we are talking to. Of course, there can be local variations depending on your specific requirements and system setup. But just as an example, the blue boxes here represent Salesforce and the white boxes represent Microsoft Dynamics ERP. When you use these two systems in parallel, typically you are handling the sales process in Salesforce and you're handling the finance and logistic processes in the ERP system. So when you get a new lead, it gets marketing qualified and you hand it over to sales. And in Salesforce, you do a conversion of the lead to an account, a contact, and an opportunity which can carry a quote. You can either use the quote tool, you can use Salesforce CPQ, or you can use any other third-party application or custom application to build your quote. That really doesn't matter, but something is typically in there. When the opportunity reaches a certain stage, which you can define, it could, for instance, be closed won, then Rapidi can detect that. And since the opportunity and the quote has been accepted by the client, RapidiOnlinie will create the customer in the Microsoft Dynamics ERP if the customer does not exist already. If you want to have contacts synchronized, they will be synchronized as well. And the opportunity with the quote will be converted to an open sales order inside of Microsoft Dynamics ERP. At the same time, once we have created the sales order in Dynamics, we will copy back that information into Salesforce in a Rapidi object called Open Orders, which gives you the possibility to see the status of the open orders at any given time directly in Salesforce. If you make any changes to the sales order inside of Microsoft Dynamics, it will be reflected back in Salesforce. When the sales order is fully delivered, you will invoice it, and the invoice, we will bring over a sales history, remove the open order. So in the sales history, you have the sales header and you have the sales lines with all the same details as you know from the ERP system. So that is also visible directly in Salesforce for the benefit of the salespeople working there. And when the invoice gets paid, Then we can bring in the payment transactions into the payment history object to Salesforce. So, and that information is of course linked to the specific invoice, to the specific account. So we can do a financial summary of, for instance, total sales this year, outstanding amounts, overdue amounts, etc. In order to do this flow, you may need to have some supporting integrations. For instance, you might want to integrate your items to the products in Salesforce. You might want to update pricing information. You also might want to convert a discount structure into price books in Salesforce. But that is basically underlying synchronizations we set up to make sure that you work on the right data at any given time. So this is a very, very common scenario. As you can see, some of the integrations here are one directional and some of them are bidirectional, and you can decide completely freely how you want that to work. You don't have to do a bidirectional interface. It's something that you can choose to utilize, or you can decide that you have a more strict process where data is only created and updated in one place. The ERP Inside Components is a part of our sales history solution that comes with the RapidiOnlinie solution. It enables you to work with the ERP data directly in Salesforce. These are some examples that we have made in order to bring in the ledger entries, the open orders, and the sales history and the financial summary directly into Salesforce, so it's available as soon as you start the integration. But you could also use dynamic pages or dynamic lists in Salesforce to view a lot of the same information. But this is a way that we have suggested to display the data so they are easy for the salespeople to work with, and which can be applied as lightning components to the different pages inside of Salesforce. We also support the setup, especially on the Microsoft Dynamics, on any platform, whether it is in the cloud, if it is hosted or privately hosted, if it is on-premise, and we also have the possibility to install the RapidiOnlinie synchronization engine on your local servers for whatever good reason, and we call that our hybrid solution. So regardless how you have deployed your Microsoft Dynamics solutions today and tomorrow, we can still support them again with one and the same integration platform. It's also simple to maintain. Here I want to add a new field to the account table in this is nav to the account table in Salesforce. I'll look up the different information. I activate the changes. And you can see on the top here that we are activating the changes, and now it's done. And the next time this transfer run, the website and the homepage information will be synchronized on all the accounts and customers where this information is available in the systems. So it's very, very easy to maintain. Then Thomas will go into some more details about this in the demo that we're going to do in just a little while. Support is also a part of the RapidiOnlinie solution because we know that we're touching business critical processes. So making sure that your solution is running at any given point in time and that we can do any kind of maintenance to your benefit is a high priority of ours. This is a measurement of our customer support quality that has been measured the past 2.5 years. It is measured on each and every single incident that we have. And you can see that from on a scale from 1 to 10, we are between 9 and 10, and we have been that consistently the past 2.5 years. And this is measured globally, so both for Asia, for Europe, and for Americas. So outstanding support to help you, making sure that you get the most out of your integration. RapidiOnlinie is an all-inclusive platform. When you buy the subscription, you get access to the myrapidi.com, which is the platform where we do the work. It's where we have all the integration tools, and in reality, you don't need anything else than this to build your own integration. But in order to do it more rapid for you, we have built the integration templates, which are complete business processes. The example is the quote to cash I showed you just before, and they're pre-configured based on best practices, so from live scenarios, and they're being updated every 6 months. They're also customizable, so you can change them if you want to have the integration work in a different way. It's also pre-documented, so you don't have to start doing your own data mapping. We have done that for you for all the standard fields that are typically a part of the integration. And once you have completed your setup, you can create your documentation as a PDF file with a one-click inside of MyRapidi. So if you have to go through any kind of audit, or if you have to document how your system is set up, it's just a push on a button in RapidiOnlinie, and then you get the documentation as a PDF. To make it even easier for you, we have built the ERP Inside for Salesforce, which are the different components in the Lightning environment that helps you look at sales history, open orders, payments, and financial overview. It's an unmanaged application, so if you want, again, to do any kind of changes to this, or if you want your Salesforce partner to do it, then that is fully possible. And the support that I mentioned just before is also included in the subscription. It can be used to maintain the integration. So if you have smaller adjustments to the solution, for instance, adding a field to an existing transfer, you just raise a ticket and we will do that for you without any additional costs. It could also be help to understand what an error message from one of the systems would mean. And it can also be used for general advisory. If you have bigger chunks of work that you want to set up in the system, then it's not included in our support, and then it is quoted. And we typically quote 3 to 4 hours per table that you want to integrate. That's the time it takes to set up, map, configure, and test the transfer. So it's very light maintenance. Or you would, in most cases, have access to do this yourself if you want to do that. Besides having the subscription, you need a one-time configuration to set it up. I made a little chart here to explain how long it typically takes. For NAV, Business Central, and to some extent also GP, it's typically around those 5 to 9 days. For the AX and 365 for finance and operations, it takes longer because the complexity of that solution. And the process is described up here. It's something that we can get into deeper details about if we go into a dialogue after this webinar. We have some pre-packaged subscriptions which you can use as a starting point, and then you have the possibility under each of the subscriptions to add additional features and functions and resources. So you have a subscription that matches your specific requirements without having to pay a lot of money for extra functionality that you don't need anyway. So you can use this as a basis to build a custom made subscription that meets your requirements specifically. You can find more details on the subscriptions on our homepage under the pricing section. One of the cool things about RapidiOnlinie is that it's a highly referenceable solution. The way that we engage with new clients, the way that we use the templates and configure the system, the project plan and the activities that we set up during a project are all template based. So everything we do is repeatable work, which is a very good way for us to control the quality. And what all of these clients have in common is just some examples, are that they have actually an integration scope very similar to the one I started to show in the flowchart, but with different Microsoft Dynamics versions underneath. So we have to dive a little bit deeper into how to configure RapidiOnlinie. And before we do that, and before I hand over to Thomas, I would just like to elaborate a little bit on the terminology that we use in RapidiOnlinie so you can follow the demo that Thomas will be doing. First of all, we have something called connections, and a connection is the way that we connect to a system. So for instance, if we want to connect to Salesforce, we have a connection to that. If we want to connect to one of the Microsoft Dynamics products, we have a connection to that. So the first thing we do is that we connect to the systems that we want to integrate with, and we read the design so we know exactly what tables and fields and other metadata that exist in the databases, and we make that available for RapidiOnlinie so that you can do the configuration. The configurations, the first part of that is building a transfer, and a transfer is a mapping of tables and fields that you want to transfer between the different systems, and the logic that applies to the transfer. So for instance, filters or data conversions is also a part of the transfers. So for each synchronization you do, for instance, from a customer to account or from account to customer, is a transfer. So you will have many different transfers in your system that each represent the synchronization in a direction for the tables. The transfers are grouped in something we call a schedule. And the schedules contain the transfers and the sequence of the transfers that should run, how frequent they should run, and in which order. So this is how we secure that, for instance, if you want to update a new contact person for a new account, that we update the account before we create the account before we create the contact person, because if we try to do it the other way around, Salesforce would generate an error because the contact is master related to the account, that the account does not exist. So the whole logic around making sure that your integration is robust, the sequencing here is quite important and is a part of our templates. In the schedule, it is also where you define how frequent the integration is running for those transfers that are within that group. And it's also where you define how you want to deal with potential errors that should arise from that schedule's integrations. You might have some schedules that are highly critical where you want to get notified right away, or you might have some schedules where it's less important and therefore you say, well, let's wait and see if the problem solves itself before I dig deeper into it. If there is an error and any runtime information that is executed inside of RapidiOnlinie is stored in a log, we don't store any transfer data information there, but it's information about how many records were updated, how long did it take, if there were any kind of error messages, etc. That would be stored in the log, but none of the actual data would be in there. The templates are basically transfers and schedules that we have configured out of the box. So you can use them as is, or you can use them as an offset to do your own configuration. Often we need to do some kind of adjustment of the transfer definitions to your specific data. You might have some old data that you don't want to have a part of your synchronization, and that, for instance, we can set up so we can filter it out. And all of these different functionalities are stored in what we call a service, and a service is basically the engine that runs the entire integration. If you have a need to process a lot of data within a short term, or if you have some transfers that are highly critical that they run right away, you have the possibility to add additional services so you can run parallel synchronizations between the two systems. So the system here in the integration is fully scalable. So we have done a lot of work to make data integration simple. We have invested more than 70,000 hours in building the integration platform with specific technologies to ease the integration between Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics. And this is the point in time where I would like to hand over to Thomas.
Yeah, so this is you could say an actual example of a Rapidi service. So each company, each solution have its own dedicated engine on the Rapidi hosted servers, have its own dedicated configuration database in regards to the setup, not the data, just like the mapping and stuff. And it's all accessible via browser, so you can access it from anywhere. And this is a dashboard example here, where you can go in and take a service status and like make sure your service is running, which is the central process, and so on. the schedule is running, process that is actually running your jobs set up to schedule, which we are going to get to. And then if you have any delays, errors, and so on, they would be listed here in the section below. But if there are anything there, that would also be sent out to an email list for notification. So you don't actually need to actively go in and monitor it. You would get notified if you need to do anything, or if there's something wrong with the data and so on. Normally, once a solution has been, you can say, integrated correctly, and we have all the validations and stuff set up in place, then 99% of the errors would be some user punched in some wrong data that is not accepted, or a system perhaps is down if you have some network issues or something like that. But that's the dashboard, an easy overview where you can easily go in and see if there are any jobs not working. But if we go a little step back and take it all from the start. So if you get a new service, you would get this interface, and then the first step is always to set up the connections. And as Henning mentioned, this is like a multiple, you can say, Dynamics session here, but we support a whole range of systems here. We have all the Dynamics products. Dynamics Nav is the C-front Nav, and we have web services, direct Nav SQL. We have the Business Central, and then we have on the AX side, the 365, sorry, GP with stored procedures and so on. So we kind of support the whole dynamic range, and we even still, as Henning mentioned, are able to support the old 90 version DOS-based early Navision. But then, of course, we have Salesforce, which is the purpose of this integration. But if you had like some data warehouse, web shop, whatever, running on like a Microsoft SQL, an Oracle database, IBM DB2, also iSeries, and so on, you could actually add that to the integration to pull some extra, like manufacturing data. We have quite a few of those where they have manufacturing data added into Salesforce as products from a third system, as long as we support it, right? But setting up a connection there is key. So you set up a system or a connection to that system, and you read the design. Now the OData here is new, so that's not pretty well defined, but the idea is basically you put in the definitions on how to connect to a system. There is some technology below that you can either, depending on the system, connect directly from the central Rapidi hosted engine directly into your system to like a MySQL database or Nav via OData. But we also have a technology where you can install a Rapidi connector locally within your network, creating a secure tunnel to the central service, and then the connection to your ERP system would be locally done within your network. So there are loads of different ways these days actually to connect to your ERP system, and that totally depends on what system you're on, what version you're on, and if you're on PC, older Navision, if you have on-premise, if you're in the cloud or whatever. Then once you have the connection set up, next step is the transfers. So you have the connection set up. What we do is we read the design, so we have the layout of the system. So here is an example. Let me just make it less confusing. On a customer transfer, going from the Nav SQL Server 1 connection from the customer table to the Salesforce account table. And this particular transfer is doing updates only. We have Let me expand this down. You give each transfer like a code, description, depending a bit on what it does. You can also make some elaborate notes actually on if you have some specific technology, but then we'll be here for a while. But what you choose is basically a source and a destination, and you have a source table or object and a destination table or object, which is defined down here. And because we're reading the design of it, you have some intelligent lookups, so you don't have to go back and forth between the systems. You can actually just like start searching. If you know it's something with custom, then you can find the table here. The same with Salesforce because we read the layout. So the connections are set up. You have a source table, a destination object, and you can then choose what the transfer does in regards of doing updates only perhaps, or updates add or adds only, and so on. So there's a lot of tweaks and definitions and functionalities to accommodate a lot of different scenarios. Diving a bit further down, we have a source control section. And the source control section is made to enable us to only read data that is actually has been changed in the source system and take it to the destination system. If we, for instance, are on a Dynamics nav, a SQL-based database, we have a source control where we can use a timestamp directly, and that'll enable us to only pick up records that have been added or changed since the last time. We have some transferred field functionality where we can have like a checkbox or something, or a timestamp that we can write back once we picked up a certain record. We have a store new ID field where we can, for instance, take an account from Salesforce, add it into nav via nav web services, and then nav can assign the customer number, or GP can assign the customer number, or AX can assign the customer number, and then we can write that back into Salesforce. So there are a lot of control fields back and forth on a record basis to ensure that you have an optimal integration, that you don't run through all the tables every time, but you only run through the actual records that are relevant to get updated in the destination. Then one of the most important things on integration are what we call Tabor Link, but it's the keys between the tables, right? So in this case and this scenario, we actually have an external ID field where we have the Salesforce ID stored, which maps directly to Salesforce, but it could be a customer number. It could also be a combination of several different fields that makes a combined key. But that is to identify, I read something from the source, I match it up to the destination. If those keys match, then I need to have a look, do I need to update it? If they don't match in this scenario, I will just go on to the next. But if I had checked add up also, then it would add a new record if it doesn't find the matching keys. Then down to the mapping there. As Henning mentioned, we have a lot of templates in regards to, to the different systems that we support. But these are easily configurable, and he did show it in the template there. But since we read the design, you can easily search, like if you want to like number, and then you know it's something with NO, and then you could like add that field, and the same with destination, save it, and you're all good. If you have, you can say you don't really know what fields it is, we have a browse table layout where you can actually read the design of the tables. So there you can actually go in and see what fields do I have available and access to on this table, and you can see the field types and so on. And if you go on to the Salesforce side, oops, sorry, it'll be the same. You can see the whole, and also if you have like pick lists and so on, you can actually see the pick lists available within those systems. And then, and sometimes you need to make some translating lists between numeric values on the ERP side conferring to the text values on the Salesforce side. But if we dive into that area, we have a really complex wiki system with a lot of formulas. Okay, the wiki system is not complex, but the formulas, they have been built over many years, integrating different systems. So you can do like DB lookups, look up data in a separate table. You can do translate, like case, if, so if numeric value 1 on the source, you translate it to this, and so on. So there are an extended list of formulas to manipulate data, also validate like emails and so on, so you're sure that they go rightly into Salesforce, where they have email validation, and in a lot of ERP systems they don't. So the formula system is quite extensive in regards to manipulate, accommodate, and also secure that the data you get over is proper validated in the destination, and also skip fields. So if it doesn't validate, you can kind of skip it and say, okay, we don't want to try to update that in the destination. And this is a system that's been built up over the last 12 years, basically, and we are still adding to it as you can say needs occur in regards of manipulating or validating data before we send it. So when you have your transfer set up, one of the important features there are the groups. Here we have the group cost, which is the customer group. So if I go in here or let me just go into the groups. Then there are a bunch of transfers in like a customer group. And they're not all activated here, but this is to control the sequence. So when you do an integration, you always have to kind of identify a master system. So if you're integrating a nav with Salesforce, but if you imagine that you're running like every 5 minutes, or you're not doing triggered, you're doing a smaller integration every night or every hour or something, you could face the scenario that you have the same customer updated in 2 different systems in between runs. So there you always need to define which system is the master. And you do that via the group. So you can then control the sequence you're running in. You can control that, okay, anything that runs from nav to Salesforce updates is going first, because nav is the master of the customer data in this scenario. And then you can control the sequence like that. And executing is schedules. So as mentioned prior, you can actually make a web service outbound call, or you can make a web service call from Salesforce saying run this particular transfer now, or run this group now. If you have a new account you just created, you want to create into nav with the web service, or into TP with the stop procedure or whatever. But if you're just running on schedules, this is the setup here. So you can then run a specific transfer, but you can also run a group. You can then control the interval. That could be, this is just a basic, but yeah, 1 day, but it could be 1 hour. It could also be down to minutes. And then you have an error handling situation where you can say, okay, sometimes there might be some scenarios that makes it error if somebody is doing some maintenance or something, or there could be some data errors. And then you choose, okay, if I have an error on data, I want to know. So if we have, for instance, a schedule set up to run like every hour, and then you say, okay, I'm going to set an error interval to every 3 hours. So that means it has a 3-time try. So if it's not something to do with the connection or anything, then it goes into notification mode. And when it goes into notification mode, then you get an email actively sent out to a list of email addresses that you can add to your service. And you will then get notified and say, okay, there's something wrong with this. And you will actually get the genuine log or error from the system that errors. So if you are trying to push perhaps customers from Salesforce into the ERP, but the ERP system is complaining because there's some value that is not correct or something like that, then it would actually be the value from the ERP system that you get in your error message, and within a few clicks, actually not just a few, but 2 clicks, you're actually on that error message in the log and can see exactly what record it is, and then you can correct the data, and once that's corrected and it runs again, then you're good to go. To go further on the log there, that's not much in this one here, but everything that you run on a transfer or schedule level would be kind of listed in a list here. But we also have a detail log where you could go in and see that that basically logs everything that's happened within Rapidi. So everything from like a central service restart to process restarting to everything, and then you can search for any specific materials. I think, yeah, that's as technical as we should go today.
So there doesn't seem to be any questions. So we're just going to end the webinar here and say thank you very much for your participation.